After my book Addiction came out, and it was a bestseller, and I was speaking all over the place about it, virtually every time I spoke, somebody would stick their hand up and say, well, what do you know about the healing of addiction with ayahuasca? And I'd have to say, I know nothing about it. So I participated in the ceremony, and in half an hour I got it. Because what I had was tears of love rolling down my cheeks, such as I'd never experienced before.
When you look at the war on drugs, it's really a perverted history. The war on drugs really was emerging out of response to the opposition to the Vietnam War, the pro-environmental movement, the rights of Black Americans in particular, and indigenous peoples. There was an uprising of the people, and then the Nixon administration was very disturbed by this, and they realized they could put all of us into one bucket. The psychedelic rangers, the environmentalists, the anti-war movement, indigenous peoples, African Americans, and they targeted us with the war on drugs.
Well, I think about the war on drugs every single day from the moment I wake up until the moment I go to sleep, right? This has been something that has consumed me for the last 30 plus years of my life. Pretty much all of my adult life I have worked one way or another as an activist, usually breaking the laws in civil disobedience in different ways to try to bring an end to the scourge of prohibition, something which I think is the most harmful social policy of my time, and one of, if not the biggest issue that needs to be changed, hopefully in my lifetime.
These addicts, life's only work is to find money for drugs.
Life at home, my mom was actually a director at a Toronto hospital. She was the director of mental health and addictions and palliative care. So right from a young age, the discussions at the dinner table were always revolving around end of life, medical assistance in dying, addiction, and there were vast debates at our dinner table. And she would always bring, a bit of her work home, telling us what was new and changing. So that mixed with reading about psychedelics at a young age. I think one of the very first books I remember reading back to front was Terence McKenna's Food of the Gods. And at that time, I didn't even realize what it was. I was a kid at summer camp, and my counselor had that book, and it was pretty interesting.
The revelation, you get the experience. But there's more to it than that. So people say, it's not simply that we ate mushrooms and got smart. It's a little more complicated than that. There are a couple of mechanisms that we didn't know about when my brother wrote Food of the Gods in 1992 and sort of explicated this theory. But what we didn't know about then that we do now are two things. One, neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity, we know that psilocybin and these other tryptamine psychedelics cause neurogenesis. They actually rewire the architecture of neural connections in the brain. And they increase the number and they change the functionality, particularly in the neocortex. They rewire that, and those are lasting changes. Epigenetics is the mechanism that enables that to become hereditary, without involving the usual way that mutations are transmitted through the egg and the sperm. This is a non-sexual way to propagate traits over generations. And those two mechanisms, which Terence didn't know about when he wrote about it, and really nobody do, the fact that we've learned all about that provides a plausible mechanism that makes the influence of these mushrooms on the early hominids not just a reasonable speculation, but more than likely this is what was going on. And I think these mushrooms gave us the tools, essentially, to create the imagination. Is what it came down to. They taught us, or we learned from them, is maybe a better way to say it, how to visualize abstractions internally and associate imagery, internal images, with meaning. That's what we do when we speak language, basically. They gave us the cognitive tools to invent language. And language is what culture runs on.
People learning that their iPhone came out of a mushroom trip and an acid trip. You know, when we understand that Steve Jobs became creative and developed these tools that we're using to run our businesses and run society because of psychedelics.
We can take substances that are considered controlled, substances that have been used in traditional paradigms and in traditional medicine, and providing evidence that they are actually safe and effective to use as psychedelic therapies.
We have to start really honing our science communication and doing it to appreciate people's values. People are frightened. We've come through a war on drugs that has ripped our society apart. It was an inequitable war on drugs, and it was just chock full of propaganda. And transitioning that conversation is going to take phase 3 clinical trials. You know, the massive universities that are working on psilocybin research, Johns Hopkins, University of Toronto, University of British Columbia, all have psychedelic researchers at them right now.
Well, we know now with over 40 universities doing clinical studies on psilocybin, proving that psilocybin is one of the most potent medicines ever studied for psychotherapy and resolving depression, anxiety, and increasing mood. And now we have evidence of increasing neurogenesis and studies of using it to slow or reverse Alzheimer's are well underway.
My life started out like really free and loving. Grew up in a great family, rode horses, played baseball. Yeah, and then I just had some things happen to me as a child and carried that trauma into like my late adulthood. I'm not going to say my age, but yeah, and just kept telling my story over and over again and could not unsuffer. And luckily I had a family who kept loving me and forgiving me and wanting to see me do better in life. I had 2 children, you know, married a beautiful man, and chose drugs to deal with the pain because I didn't know how else to do it.
I'm here because of my experience, my journey with my brother for the last several years, and his experience with addiction and my experience supporting him through that addiction, being his closest family member that was really advocating for him and his recovery. He was just in that street life from a young age and partying and trying to, like, I think, use substances to you know, numb his early trauma, right? And just to have a good time all the time. That was sort of his MO. It was just to keep things happy and good and fun, and he was wild. And that progressed, you know, and the addiction and substance abuse got out of hand, and I got pulled in probably 5 years ago, and he was reaching out to me in crisis all the time, but he was blaming it always on other things, and I didn't know the signs of addiction. And so I was getting caught into being this caring sister and wanting to help him through, you know, whatever struggles he was going through, sending him money and getting him food and different kinds of things like that, right? And there was always some crisis of him getting evicted and losing his job and people ripping him off, and there was always like one thing after another. And then 2 or 3 years ago, he moved to Vancouver, and he had work, but again, it was constantly, the stuff would happen and he'd lose his jobs, and I was still trying to be the good sister and help him out. And then finally, a couple of years ago, realized that he actually admitted to me and that he was using heroin. And
anyway, like I said, my family forgave me through it, loved me through it, and I was introduced to plant medicine 3 years ago. and went on a safari and did ayahuasca, 5-MeO-DMT, ibogaine, and like it just 100% changed my life. And I knew when I heard the concept of it that it was going to work, because I'd never believed in going to doctors. I'd tried methadone, I'd tried Suboxone. You know, I was 35 years on the east side, so like I did everything I could to try to get clean. And when I heard the word plant medicine, I was like, wow, maybe this is going to work. Maybe I have a chance. And
there's just chemical shifts in the brain that can happen with some of these substances. Being able to go back and experience kind of the root cause and sort of meet that sense of the self in a way, you know, and that connection with all of life that we have, you know, that spiritual. And in recovery, they talk about addiction as a spiritual deficit as well. And plant medicines are really reconnecting people with the source of their existence, of our spiritual nature.
And yeah, I've been clean since, and you know, I've been able to forgive myself, accept forgiveness from others, and like I get paid to literally love people through this stuff, right? Like I work in the field, I'm a recovery coach / intake worker, and like I get to love women that are coming from downtown and broken and twisted and shattered, and you know, just watch them grow and change. And unfortunately, the way the medicine is not legalized, all of it here, we have to like keep it on the down low, and I can't bring it out into the recovery society. But you know, I'm the methadone and the Suboxone, like the alternative medicines that are going on right now, just scare me, because it just keeps people suffering and keeps them sick, right?
You know, that pain, you know, that self-hate, to be able to face that and release that and start moving past, you know, because till you do, you just can't. And I tried therapy, I've tried their drugs, and I've tried all these things. Nothing works like that.
Probably maybe 12 or 13 years ago, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And when I went to the traditional system that we have now, I shouldn't say traditional, when I went to the medical system that we have now, they told me that I needed to be on injections every week for the rest of my life. And that if I did not do that, then I had a chance that I was going to be blind, deaf, or paralyzed. And my father is a doctor of genetics, and my mother raised me as a vegetarian and taking a lot of supplements, and what they were asking me to do was go against everything that I had already learned about how to heal the body naturally. And so I declined, and I decided to go where the wind took me and listen to my own intuition on where to go to heal. And that eventually led me to working with shaman from the Yawanawa tribe in Brazil, and working with ayahuasca and kambo and a couple other medicines called Hape and Sananga. And it will be 6 years ago this March since I was undiagnosed of multiple sclerosis, which they say there is no cure for. And since then, I've been working with Gabor Maté, doing training with him on the healing process. And I truly believe that healing can happen and that we can heal naturally. And I believe that these plant medicines and kambo really support that healing process to clear out on a cellular level trauma, on a mental and emotional level. And I believe that that's what they did for me, is that walking in and healing the trauma is where our bodies can heal. Gabor talks about this a lot, and this is what I teach my clients as well. And we've seen amazing results. As we know, I cannot make any claims, but we also know that that we've seen diseases reversed.
Virtually every time I spoke, somebody would stick their hand up and say, well, what do you know about the healing of addiction with ayahuasca? And again, ayahuasca is this Amazonian plant, a combination of two plants that has been used for healing purposes in the Amazon for hundreds of years. And I'd have to say I know nothing about it. And then the question would arise again and again, to the point I got frustrated with it. Like, stop asking me what I don't know. I've just written a book based on everything I know, and you're asking me about the thing I don't know. But then somebody said, did you know that you could experience it here in Vancouver? Because there was a Peruvian shaman coming up here to lead a ceremony. So I participated in the ceremony, and in half an hour I got it. Because what I had was tears of love rolling down my cheeks, such as I'd never experienced before. And I got that something in the psychedelic experience does two things. Both of them are necessary for healing. And when I say healing, I don't just mean addiction, I mean the healing of anything. Being in touch with the pain and the sorrow and the grief that a lot of people carry and that they suppress. And addictions really are an attempt to escape from pain that people carry in their bodies. But that love that I experienced also shows you that underneath all that, there is an essential quality to us which is connected and present and experiences love, so that there's no need to run. So the psychedelic experience, and this is true whether we were talking about healing plants like ayahuasca or mushrooms, or whether you're talking about the man-made, the human-derived made psychedelics like MDMA, they all have the potential of taking us beyond the conditioned mind, the controlled, conditioned, and very constricted mind, to get in touch with deep, deep emotions, suppressed pains, and sometimes very disturbing memories.
We know that depression is pandemic through Western cultures. That's equally true for anxiety. I mean, depression and anxiety are byproducts of a capitalist, mechanized, dog-eat-dog, overcrowded world. And culturally, we are not well right now.
Statistically, there's about 50 million people that have post-traumatic stress disorder in the United States, and 20 million of those people choose addictive substances to deal with their traumatic memories.
Taken out of a home when you're 5 years old and then living in there until you're 18 years old and living through all the abuse, those are important times that you would need to learn how to be a parent. So for a whole multiple generations across Canada, you had these people coming out of residential school and having families and then not knowing how to raise them. So drugs and alcohol have been a remedy for that pain.
Do you have anything in place on how to support the emotional healing of the trauma? They're talking about the opioids, but they don't talk to the trauma. They don't really have anything in place for that.
CBD has potential to eliminate 85% of opiates. 20% of homeless people are homeless because they were prescribed opiates from a doctor. You know, these are solutions. But it's Big Pharma that's running it, and that's why it's not legalized here yet. How is CBD going to actually harm somebody?
And I personally believe, and I've seen, heard testimonies of literally hundreds of people who healed their addictions using spirit plants or using substances that are used in an integral, respectful, intentional, ceremonial way, and it's for healing purposes.
It's reasonable to see that when many individuals benefit individually from these medicines, in terms of the reduction of anxiety and depression, we're going to see a greater degree of wellness in society as a whole.
I've been studying drug policy issues. I'm a substance use focused specialist physician, and I've been working in this area for over 20 years. And I think we've come a long way in terms of acknowledging that substance use is something that we need to treat as a public health issue rather than a criminal justice issue. But I don't think we've come so far as really acknowledging that substance use is part of the human condition. And as long as there's been human beings on this planet, we've been looking at ways of changing our consciousness, and whether that's through a coffee or a beer, or through exercise, or through taking drugs that are presently illegal.
So prohibition is just a joke. The drugs are cheaper and of higher quality now than they ever have been. But so much more available through things like Instagram and stuff like that. People aren't even bothering with the dark web, So as a policy, the drug war has been a complete failure, and is actually making things much, much worse. We've had 9,000 people die in the last 4 years in Canada from opioid overdoses.
We can use this medicine in a safe and sustainable because you need the medicines to just come from the countries where they come from, and you need that to benefit some of those people as well. Like definitely benefit where these indigenous tribes and these indigenous peoples, they should be benefiting as well.
What is the overall goal of your organization or your company? Is it to elevate the commons? And how can you do that? And are you giving back? This psychedelic movement has been moved by elders, by indigenous cultures, by people like Paul and Dennis and Erica Dick and many other people in this field. They've done a lot of work. And are you even aware of whose progress you're stepping over to make an economic, dollar? So I think people that are entering the space really need to look at that. Like, do you truly understand the lineage of these medicines?
And I see this particularly relevant to the whole environmental crisis that we're going through, because one of the hallmarks of deep psychedelic experience with mushrooms and the other psychedelics is the overwhelming experience of interdependence and connectedness, that there are ways in which the normal experiences of isolation, of being an isolated individual, show that underlying that there is a deep sense of interrelatedness and connectivity. We have lost that sense of connectedness with nature now, with the biosphere, and I see psychedelics as potentially playing an important role in helping people to reconnect with nature.
Our belief systems are divided. So in our country as well, we experience the same divides. And I look at psychedelic medicine as a way forward to heal some of these divides, to give us an option to have hope and positivity. Even if it's not long acting, even if it's not something that's taken on a regular basis, having hope is a massive opportunity.
We're in such a privileged place right now that, people are still incarcerated for what we're talking about right now. And ultimately, we have the opportunity to use this to improve so many things that have been challenging.
Rather than looking at people as big groups, like individuals within those groups really need to start dropping their ego around, the cause and the story associated with, this and that. Like, for this to move forward, there needs to be no more opposition, because doctors want people to get well, and shamans want people to get well, and people that are in labs want people to get well. So we all have the same goal.
But I've never met such enthusiasm about a topic than I have in this space. Everyone wants to talk about this. You could probably, if you can find the contacts of the companies you're interested in, I guarantee you they're willing to talk to you.
This war on drugs has gone so much off the rails that it has traumatized all levels of society. If you are a judge sitting in a courtroom and you have to then sentence, the 150th person to jail or prison for simple possession, after a while, you must really, do I really need to do this? The law dictates they do with sentencing parameters. And so, seeing the trauma that has emanated from vertically and horizontally through all, dimensions of society, is suffering that we all share. And the amazing things about psilocybin and the psychedelics is that it heals. And you want to reach across the aisle. You have this feeling of not a oneness and unanimity, but you have compassion. And all these little things that seem to be such big issues seem irrelevant. You really come to refocus on the priorities of life. What's the priorities of life? Sharing, kindness, loving your family, loving your neighbors, loving your friends, lending a helping hand. You're not in it to get something. You're in it to help people. And the reward is the satisfaction that you're a good person, and you know you're a good person, and you're walking your talk. And I think that's the best payback of all.